Hello everyone, I'm Alfian and today we are going to solve the Hackerrank challenge on the React section. For this particular challenge, we are tasked to develop an application called CryptoRank Exchange to estimate a number of cryptocurrency coins from the USD that the user can receive based on an entered amount of that currency. We have several currencies here as the example table here on the screenshot, and then the detailed requirements are the field and display, which is the input field allows entry of the amount to be exchanged, and the table displays the exchange rate and number of coins for each cryptocurrency. So for this particular challenge, we are not allowed to edit the app.js, and also there is one file called the cryptocurrency-list.js, which is the one that we will use as a reference to be displayed in this table. And also we have the main.js that acts as the parent to render the table component right here, and the table will act as the children from the main.js. So let's implement the requirements number one, which is the fields and display. For the input field, allows entry of the amount to be exchanged, and for this one we can declare a useState called the input and then set input to record the current amount that we enter in the input field. And for the useState, for the initial state, if we look over here, the input field is empty with no error messages, so we can declare as empty string. And then the number of coins column displays 0.000 to 8 digits after the decimal point for each cryptocurrency. So after this useState, let's finish our useState first. And for other one, we can declare another state to check if the input that we enter exceeds the max balance that we have right here. So we can declare a passive state called the max balance without the function in the useState that takes the number. We can copy this one, and then we can check if the input exceed the max balance. Then we can return an error message right here: amount cannot be empty or amount exceeds the current balance. And for the table, displays exchange rate and number of coins for each cryptocurrency. Let's go to the table, and for the table we have the import cryptocurrency list from the cryptocurrency-list file. We can use this. Let's check this out to see what is it about by using the control and then pressing click. And then there is the cryptocurrency code and the name, and also the exchange rate as the integer right here. And also there is a Bitcoin with the abbreviation, and also Dogecoin. Let's go back to the table. For this one, we have the table row and the table data. For the table data -test ID exchange data, we can map this table row based on the array from the cryptocurrency list right here. So without further ado, let's create a cryptocurrency list, and then using the map. For the map, we can use the data, or just data, and then using this parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, we can paste our table row, and then it's being rendered correctly. And for the currency name, we can change this to the actual name, which is the using the brackets and inserting the data, the name. And then for the table data number 2, which is the exchange rate, we can declare our exchange rate by using the 1 USD is equals to the, let's change the currency rate to use the parentheses, so we can render our actual data right here from the cryptocurrency list.map. This is the data of the rate. And also for the currency code right here, we can change this using the parentheses and then deleting the string to be the data with the code property right here. So it is rendering correctly. And then for this exchange rate, we can change this in the main.js. Let's use the input to the input value here. This is the input. Let's make our workspace a lot more wider to make the implementation easier. For the input and the value, we can change the value to follow the input useState right here. And then for the onChange attribute, we can add the e as the parameter. Since we are directly mutating the input state, then we can use the set input and then pass in the event target with the value property. So let's test our implementation by adding a placeholder let's replace this one with the input, and then we can change this later. Let's reload this. Let's change our input. Yeah, so it's being rendered correctly. 0 and empty string. Let's undo this. Input cannot be empty. And also let's make our input here to be reflected to the table conversion right here by passing this input useState as a props to the table component right here using the input props, and then pass in the input. And also we can pass in the max balance from the passive useState, max balance props, and then passing our max balance, the actual max balance useState. And let's go back to the table.js. Let's operate on this number of coins and passing our props. Let's destructure this one, pass in the input props and max balance props, and we should process this not available to be our actual input by let's see another requirements. If invalid, show an error message. Okay, let's get to number 2. Is your input and amount within their available balance? And we can check if our input is exceeding the actual balance, then it should return an error. Let's check using a ternary operator. Let's check our if input is above than the max balance. If it is, then we can return what is the error message. Amount cannot exceed the available balance. If it's not, then we should add another check. If the amount is below the $0.01 and the error message shows amount cannot be less than 0.01, instead of using the ternary operator, we can just change this into a function. Let's declare this later. Let's create a function. Let's create a function called the error message. And for the error message, takes no parameter, and then declare our implementation using the explicit if check. If input is equals to max balance, then returning this one, amount cannot exceed the available balance, and add another check if input is below the 0.01. If it is, then we should return amount cannot be less than 0.01. And then we can add another check if we satisfied all of the input without exceeding or below the 0.01, using return with empty string. And let's use this error message by simply declaring it right away as a function. And let me show you something that for the initial state, that the input field is empty with no error messages. And for the initial state, instead of declaring an error message function right here, we can declare actual error useState with the constant error and set error with the useState an empty string, and then we can set this error as our initial state and declaring the error, and then the error went away, but we need useEffect to reflect every change or to monitor the input field if the input field is either exceeding the max balance or is below the minimum value. So let's change the error message to be useState, not useState but useEffect, and I'm pressing tab and the useEffect already declared automatically right here. Let's declare the useEffect with the anonymous arrow function, and the output is the curly brackets, and this for the second parameter is the dependency array, and inside the dependency array we can insert the input to monitor our input, and we can add a check. Oh, let's declare the error message constant error message again, and we can use set error right here, set error, and then passing the error message as a function, I think. Or we can simply declare, instead of using useEffect, we can declare something to get around this. If it's just empty, then the error message will go away. Let's add another check if input is below 0.01 and not an empty string. Okay, so for the error message right here, we don't have to use this. It's too complicated. Let's change the error message back to our original implementation right here. So let's make this happen. 01, 02, 0.005. Okay, what about 0.3, 2.7? Okay, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so it's now working as expected. You might be wondering why I am using this parenthesis beside the error message, so it acts as another method or as alternative. Without using the useEffect, we can directly reflect the message from this function right here to our return statement right here, and then every change from the input, and for the input, if it's either the empty string or if there is any input, then it will return the respective message to our error message function right here. So let's go back to our table to reflect the change from the input and make this synchronize with the input field right here. By going back to the table.js, and then we can add a function called the constant calculate. It takes empty parameter, and then inside the calculate, to see for the initial state we can pass in the 0.000, and if you look closely, it should be 8 digits below the decimal point. We can use a GS function called toFixed, and we will look over the documentation about this after this one. Let's add a check first. If input props is equals to empty string, then we can simply return 0, but we need to change the 0 to be 0.00 until it hits 8 digits after 8 decimal points. So let's create our implementation. So this one called the toFixed, I already declared it right here. If we run the code, it displays 8 digits after the comma or 8 decimal points. So if we change the toFixed to be 2, and then after we run this, it will return only 2 digits. So the toFixed parameter can take a number, and then we can show this decimal point based on the parameter right here. So let's say if we input 8 as the toFixed parameter right here, then it will display 8 digits after the comma sign or 8 decimal points. So it goes the same to the 2 digits or 3 or whatever you need, but for this one, for this implementation, we should declare 8 digits. So let's create another function called the constant and convert number, or just convert, that takes the input from the number, and then for the output we can convert this to number like the one we declare, like the one from the documentation, this one, financial X. Then we can simply return the using the parseFloat. Let's copy this one, go back to our implementation, make this full screen, and for the number we can change this part to follow the parameter naming right here. And then for the return 0, we can wrap this inside the convert function. And then for the calculate, we can simply use this inside the not available table data right here, using the curly brackets, convert, and then as a function. And it's returning not a number. How about we change this convert to be parseFloat, still not a number. Let's go back to the MDN docs, and it's returning as expected. if we input the 0. So let's add another return to empty string. Oh no, it's not the convert but calculate. It's the calculate. Sorry, it was my mistake to inserting convert function right here instead of calculate this particular function inside the component of the table component. Let's use the calculate, and it displays the correct output of the number of coins. So let's add another check to see if the input props is exceeding the max balance props. If it is, then we can return a string of not available. Let's make our change 0.01, and we should add another check to return our actual implementation by passing the data dot rate to the calculate function right here. After this, we can pass this inside the function as the parameter called the rate, and then we can simply return the input props. Not input props, yeah, it is input props, and then times or multiply by the rate. But we need to change the rate to be 8 digits below the comma or 8 decimal points. So if we insert 0.01 and it's returning like this, a variable number of digits after the comma, we don't want that. We should cap this inside the converter function that we already declared here to the 8 decimal points. Let's wrap this and then use the convert. Takes the input props, multiply by the rate. Let's make this happen by using 0.01, and then the conversion rate already declared right here, and it looks neat. How about 100? Okay, it should displays correctly. So what about the one that exceeds the current balance right here? By inserting 1800, and then the number of coins should display not available, and the error message pops up called the amount cannot exceed the available balance. How about using 0.001? It should also displays not available, but instead it's calculating properly. To filter that, we can add another check. Let's add another check if the input props is below 0.01, and then we also returning not available. But we can merge this if clause as one using the OR operator. Let's delete this. Add or check or the input props is below the 0.01 mark. If it is, then we should return not available. So let's run the test to see if it works. And the error says should display error saying amount cannot be empty when field is empty after entering some value. So let's solve this one first. 0.01 with the $sign in front of it. Let's over to the main.js in the $sign. Let's test this. Okay, the error remaining is 3 more. Initial render should not display any error. Let's see our app.test.js, the file right here. Let's find this test case. Should not display any error. Let's enlarge our test, enlarge our environment. Query by test ID, error should not to be in the document by test ID. Let's see our test ID, faulty error, and this one displays error. Okay, what about the data test ID? Let's see which error aside from this. Okay, so for the empty string check right here, we need to delete this and add our proper check. And for the error message check right here, it should be a false value, and because the return is the empty string, and empty string is also considered a false value, then for the error message right here, we should wrap the test error, wrap this test error inside the error message, and to see if there is an error message, it should display the p tag right here. And then if the error message is just empty string, then we should display just a fragment tag. So let's run the test. Okay, 2 more remaining. We can also use the short circuit operator and then remove this else statement and the fragment sign. Let's run the test again. It behaves the same way, and for the should not display any errors for the initial rendering, and so we should declare error string constant error and set error message, and then we can declare a useState of just empty string. And then for the error message right here, we can declare what about using the useEffect instead of error message function right here, to see if it really works by declaring the useEffect just like we did earlier. And I'm sorry if I make you to write this again. It's just a matter of making this test case pass. And let's track our input. Let's track our input, and for the inside the useEffect clause, we should trigger our error message without passing any parameter. And let's move the error message to the top above the useEffect because it's an arrow function, and then useEffect will run every time the input has been changed. For the error message, we can add a check called the input inside the set error, and then for the set error, not the set error, but let's make this more verbose by using the curly brackets, because we have 2 or more statements that we need to type right here. The first one is the set error. Let's comment our useEffect this because it's kinda laggy, and then set the error, and then for the message we insert the amount cannot exceed the available balance, and then return to get out from this function because we don't need to declare another one after the input has been satisfied. And another check for the other check, you can also do the same thing. declare a set error again, set error, and then declare the return after that. And also if all of the if clauses is passed, then we can simply set error to just nothing, just an empty string. And for the set error here, let's remove this one. And for the error message, we can change the error to be error variable right here of the useState. If there is an error, then we should return this error message using just the error as the string. And it also behaves the same thing. If it's just an empty string, it's also considered a falsy value, then the right hand side will not be rendered, or the p tag will not be rendered. So let's run the code, see if it works. User reading should not display any error, and we have too many re-renders. Let's reload this. Okay, so let's test this out. Okay, so it says amount cannot be less than $0.01. Let's run the test again. I am still kind of confused of the initial rendering should not display any errors, but for this one we have the error as the initial useState of just empty string. Then for this one, it should display error saying amount cannot be empty when field is empty after entering some value. Should we declare another state to check if our application or the component is considered the initial state or not as a boolean value? Let's try by adding another useEffect that takes no dependency, then set the error by an empty string. Let's run this. It's still showing an error. Okay, so let's try another approach. Let's delete this one, and let's also delete the useEffect. Instead of using error message, then we can just simply use the onChange function right here. Instead of using direct set input, then we can use handle change function. And for the handle change, we can declare the constant handle change that takes the e, which is the e target.value, handle change right here. And for the handle change, we can set like this. Next, let's copy this and paste this, and let's declare our set input right here, set input with the e target.value. And after set input, we can add the check against the if it's exceeding the max balance or if it's below the 0.01 mark. And after that, let's alter this error message. It should be rendering correctly because we don't have any more error message function that tie to the render return right here. So let's run the code again to see if it works. Okay, so let's add another one. For this one, error should display error saying amount cannot be empty when field is empty after entering some value. Okay, so let's add another check. If the input is empty, then we can paste the set error right here saying amount cannot be empty, and then pass in the return statement right here. So let's run the code again to see if it works. Check if the input is empty, not equal, not equal, but using the strictly equal. Let's run this code again. Let's preview this code. 0.01. Yeah, it's still showing amount cannot be less than 0.01 because empty is also considered below 0.01. Let's move this if else above the input 0.01, or we can add this on the top of the max balance check right here. So let's run the code again. Okay, what about this one? 01. Okay, so it doesn't behave as we expected. It's kind of misaligned. If we remove the 0, then it says amount cannot be less than 0.01, but if I add a 0, it says amount cannot be empty. In the React, this one is important for our implementation. We can declare a check, a useState check, to see if it's the initial state or not by using the constant is initial and set is initial, and declare useState to true. And for the useEffect, we can declare a useEffect arrow function, and then track the input as the dependency right here to reflect the changes from the input, and we can move the input statement right here, all of the if else's. So let's add 0.01 cannot be empty, and it should display set error as the empty because it didn't find any error. Okay, so let's make this happen. Input amount cannot be empty, and then what about 0.001 less than, what about 18,000? Amount cannot exceed the available balance. Amount cannot be empty. Okay, so for the initial value, we can test this using the useEffect. It takes empty dependency array and then set the set error to be an empty string. Yeah, it's still showing amount cannot be empty, which is kind of confusing because the useEffect right here with no dependency array should display on the initial render of the component as the one that we declare right here, which is the empty string. Since we already declared the initial of the boolean value of the useState, then after the initial change of the handle change right here, we can set the set is initial to be false, and add another check if the is initial is true, then we can check this to false, permanently check this to false, permanently changing this to false. So the way it does is like checking if it's already the initial value. If it's true, then we can change this to false. If it's already false, then we don't have to set is initial to false every time we type the handle change on the onChange from the input field right here. And so for the input which equals to the empty string, then we can add an double ampersand sign as the AND operator. And for the next one, check if is initial is false. And we can add another check right here. So the way it does is like checking if we made any change to the initial to the input field right here. If we made any change after the first initialization, after our React application initialization, let's say if we type anything, then the set initial will be changed to false. If we don't touch anything or don't type anything inside the input field right here, then the set is initial will remain true. So let's run the code to see if it works, hopefully. Okay, so that's about it. I'm sorry that it took so long for me to solve this kind of code. You can experiment with on your own to see what works best for you, to see if it's already a clean code or not. And for this tutorial, I don't think this is the clean code, because hey, we are learning here, and I don't think I can justify my statement about the learning. Yeah, we should strive for the better implementation and better code for our future application. So that's about it. If you have any questions, you can write in the comment section, or if you have any better solutions, you can tell us in the comment section below. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. And by the way, we solve all of the React challenge right here. So let's see our preparation. And it's already gold tier, and I think after all of this journey from the React section on the Hackerrank challenge, you can go to claim your React certification from this tutorial, and I hope you ace your certificate. Okay, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.